One of the first questions you're going to ask yourself when you get a plant is, where are you going to place it in your house? And that's the question that I've asked myself whenever I get any new plants. Like, what's the best place I'm going to put these plants in my house so that they're going to get enough light that they need and also have the best chances at growing up healthy and green with no issues? So I did a bit of research, and I just wanted to share with you guys 4 different factors that I think are the main pieces of information you want to consider when deciding where to place plants inside of your house. And trust me, this is going to be really important, because if you don't get this right, there's going to be a lot of problems you're going to run into with your plants. So the first factor you want to consider is the lighting. As anyone knows, plants need light. Light is how plants perform photosynthesis, is how they convert carbon dioxide and water into their sugars that they use to feed themselves. So when it comes to lighting in your house, there's really only 4, maybe 5 different places you can put it. The only place you're really going to get any lighting is from a window. Now, this doesn't mean that just any window will do. You also want to consider the direction that your window is facing, whether that's north, south, east, or west. There's kind of a general guideline about which direction will give you the most lighting. Assuming that you're living in the northern hemisphere, south-facing windows are going to give you the most direct lighting. East and west-facing windows will give you a bit of direct light, but also some indirect light, depending on what time of day it is. And north-facing windows will probably give you the least amount of sunlight, just kind of a bit of indirect sunlight. Mostly light that has been reflected either out of the sky or off of different buildings or hills or greenery around your house. So the reason that's important, different plants have different preferences on the type of lighting that they want to have the best chances of growing successfully. Some plants prefer a lot of direct sunlight, like succulents, while other types of plants will prefer more indirect sunlight, maybe a little bit more in the shade, like a prayer plant or moss or even some ferns. Those tend to like kind of the shadier areas and more indirect lighting. So for the most part, when you get plants from a plant nursery, it'll usually come with a tag that says what type of lighting it prefers. If it doesn't, you could always ask one of the workers to see what kind of conditions work best for it. But usually it'll tell you if it likes bright direct sunlight or if indirect sunlight is probably going to work for it. So when you're thinking about the lighting, that's going to help guide you and give you some kind of direction on where to place your plants within your house. You ideally want to place it near a window that's going to give it the lighting that it prefers, and you also don't want to place it too far from that window either. So while your window might be a south-facing window, if you place it too far away, it's probably not going to give it enough lighting to be happy. At the same time, if you have a plant that loves indirect sunlight, likes to prefer shadier type of areas, then maybe, and if you only have like a south-facing window in your house that has space for the plant, then maybe you might want to move it a bit further from that window so it doesn't get blasted with direct sunlight and cause the leaves to burn up. The lighting is going to give you 2 factors that will help you kind of filter out what places might work for placing your plants. 1, you want to place it near a window, and 2, you also want to consider the distance from that window that you want to have your plants placed. And if you just so happen to not have any great place near a window, you can always buy some grow lights of your own to allow you to place your plants wherever you want in the house. Because as long as you have access to a power outlet, you can just plug in your grow light and you just place your plants kind of around that grow light, and that will give it enough light to grow and be happy and do their photosynthesis and feed themselves. So lighting is the first piece of information I would consider when deciding where to place your plants in your house. The second piece of information that I would consider is the humidity levels. So depending on what type of plant you get, some plants might prefer to have a little bit more humidity to have the most optimal growing conditions. So certain ferns, mosses, and prayer plants, like the one I have in the background here, those type of plants prefer to have higher humidity. And so what that means is if you want to boost up the humidity levels, ideally you're going to want to place it somewhere where there's a little bit more water floating around in the air, or there's a water source that could generate the higher levels of humidity that it might prefer. So these could be places like your bathroom or maybe your kitchen sink, because those are places where there's going to be water flowing, and where there's water flowing, there's probably going to be higher humidity in those areas. And if you're also considering using a humidifier, that can also give you kind of an idea of where you might be able to place the plants based on where you're able to hook up the humidifier to a power source. So that's the second piece of information that I consider, is the humidity. And the third piece of information that I want to think about is the space that I have to place that plant. So even though the lighting might be great, it might be perfect for the humidity levels that the plant wants. If you simply don't have space, then that's just a no-go. But at the same time, you can also get a little bit creative of how you create space to place your plants. So what I'm mainly thinking about is either hanging your plants up or putting them up on a shelf somewhere, maybe where it's not necessarily so easy to reach. Maybe it's in a kind of hidden corner that you haven't really seen before or paid too much attention to. And also at the same time, you might want to think about if it's going to look great with the general aesthetic you're kind of looking for in your house. Maybe you want a very minimalistic design, you just want to place the plant and be the center of attention on your coffee table. Or maybe you want to have like a huge green space in your house, a green room, where you have a whole bunch of plants all over the place. And you just want that one place to be your plant area. That can also guide you as to where you might want to think about placing your plant, assuming that the lighting and the humidity are good. You might also want to think about the convenience of where that plant is, because most plants, well, pretty much all plants are going to need to be watered at some point. So you might also want to think about how convenient is it going to be for you to water that plant. You don't want to place it like 5 stories up on the 5th floor of your house if you're like living in a tower or something, and the only way to get water to it is to climb up 5 stories of stairs every time you want to give it some water. The convenience is a big factor in this. So if you want to place it somewhere where it's really convenient, maybe you want to place it near your kitchen where you have access to a water source, or maybe your bathroom, basically anywhere that there's a sink nearby where you can get some water quickly and then not have to walk too far to reach your plants. So if you're a lazy person or you just really don't want to spend too much time walking around your house watering your plants, then convenience is another factor that you might want to consider when placing your plants in your house. All right, so those 3 pieces of information, the lighting, the humidity, and the space, are 3 factors you want to think about. But the 4th is it's a little bit different because it's more like a set of no-nos that you want to think about. There are certain places where in your house that you definitely do not want to place your plant. Some examples might include placing it right next to a heater. That's generally going to be a bad idea. If your house is running the heater, it's going to heat up the plant, and that's probably not going to be good for it. And kind of same thing goes placing it like in your kitchen area. Maybe you don't want to place it above a stove or something where you're cooking food. Maybe the odors or the smoke is going to get up in the plant and make it not do so well. That's another factor you want to think about. And if your plant happens to be toxic, either to pets or kids or both, then you probably don't want to place it in an area where your pets are able to reach it. Maybe you want to think about placing it somewhere where it's up on a shelf somewhere where your cats or your dogs or your kids won't be able to reach it and bite into that plant, which would cause you a whole bunch of issues, not to mention like the vet bills or taking the kid to the hospital or anything like that. And you also want to think about placing it somewhere where it's not going to get in the way. Like you don't want to have to push through plant leaves every time you walk through your hallway or something. You might want to think about how big is that plant going to grow. If it does grow too big, will I have to move it somewhere so that it gets out of the way? So that might not be a big deal to most people, but it's just another piece of information you want to think about. So those are the 4 pieces of information that I came across in my research when it comes to placing your plants in your house. But as always, you want to make sure you do your own research on your own plant to see what kind of conditions that it prefers before placing it in your house. So you don't want to just go up and grab any old random plant that looks nice and just place it wherever in your house. You always want to make sure to think through this very carefully to make sure that your plant has the best chances of growing green and healthy without having to die off. And just thinking through these things is going to give you the best chances of having a successful plant. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you liked it, leave it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.